Hi everybody, this is MaDonna with Mad Bees Quilt and Sew, and we're here today and it is our 8th week. Hard to believe that you and I have been sewing together for 8 weeks now, but we've been getting some progress done and we're getting some things taken care of, and hopefully we've learned a couple tips and tricks. This past week I had asked you to sew your blocks together, so I have mine sewn together and it's in a 5x5 square and it should be square. I'm not going to guarantee that on mine because I can see that I have some seams that didn't match up perfect and I have an edge over here that's not perfect, but that's okay because in the next step we're going to help to get it square. So what we're going to do next is we're going to start to measure for our borders. And in our borders, they are going to be 2 sets of borders, and we're going to put one on totally around all 4 sides. Then we're going to measure again and we're going to put our second set of borders on. Many of you have probably over the years taken your piece of fabric, and I'm going to grab one of these, taken our border fabric, and we have laid it out on our quilt and we have just sewn it on. And then we get down to this end and we cut it off, and then we go to the other side and we do exactly the same thing. There is a problem with that. And the problem with that is that we're not making sure that both of these borders are the exact same length when we're putting them on. We're not really sure what they're going to measure. And we want to be as consistent when putting these borders on as we can be. Because this is a square quilt, we're going to do the 2 outsides first. And I decided this was the outside because this is the bottom left-hand corner, bottom right-hand corner of your quilt. And this is the top corner, the top left of your quilt. So we're going to do the 2 side pieces first and then top and bottom. And you could do it the opposite way. It doesn't really matter in this project. Some projects it will definitely matter because you want to do whichever is the longest direction first. It will help you to conserve fabric. But some, it depends on if you're using a directional print. So it really, you have to think about it a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure in 3 places across my quilt, and then I'm going to average out that measurement. So I prefer to use a traditional tape measure when measuring. So I have got a regular, and these are like a plastic coated fabric. I'm going to use the end of it and put it on my quilt right here, and I'm going to come across the center of this, and I'm going to come up with a measurement. And I am right at 30 inches. According to the book, I should be at 30.5 inches. So somewhere in my piecing, which I'm okay with, okay, I've lost a 1/2 inch, which is a little 1/4 inch plus, a little 1/4 inch plus, you know, it happens, but I'm okay with that. I'm going to then come over here to the outside and measure again. And what am I at? I am just shy of 30 inches. And I'm going to come out here and measure one more time. And I am again at that same shy, just barely shy of 30 inches. So I'm going to go with a 30-inch piece for my length of these. So the pieces that I have here are actually already cut into the 1.5-inch strip, and they have a nice fold in it. I'm going to place that fold onto my cutting mat, and I'm going to measure across. I'm going to get it nice and straight here, using one of the lines on there, and it's butted up to my end there. I'm going to place my ruler on this. Now I got asked this question earlier today. How do I put my ruler on when I do something like this? I typically don't go this way with it because it's not holding it as secure. When it's something skinny like this, I can put my ruler all the way across it, set it on there, and make sure that it's nice and straight on your edge there, which I can see that that's perfectly straight going across there, right to my 15. So I'm smooth there, I'm smooth there, I'm right to my 15. I'd like to be just a hair further. And if you've used these rulers at all, you'll know that you have to pick them up. You can't slide them. It'll move your fabric. Now, I am going to waste these 2 little ends here. I'm okay with it. You have to decide what you want to do. If it's something where you're going to need these pieces at another point, you may want to fold your fabric differently, but we do not. I'm going to, okay, I decided I wanted to be at 30, not 30.5, so I'm going to cut this off at 15. Now, you could, if you wanted to, but I would not, stretch this to make it to Alex's 30 and a half, but then you're going to be opening up seams and you're going to do all of those kind of things, and we don't want to do that. So once I've done my binding strip, I'm working with a 1.5 now by 30-inch long piece. I've got a center mark on there. I'm going to come to my quilt. Oh, and I forgot this tip to tell you. When you're doing a square like this, whatever sides you mark or you measure, put a pin in those sides, because otherwise you could forget which ones you were doing. Okay, so I would just throw a pin over here, because if an hour later this got turned on me, I would want to know that I was working on those sides. So I am going to now take this piece here, and I can either measure it to 15, or I can just take it and fold it in half, come up with my center measurement, put a good finger press in there. So by that I mean I'm just grabbing it and squeezing it, heating it up with my fingers a little bit. I'm going to carefully open that up. And you can kind of see it right there, that little crease. Right there, there's a little crease going through there. I'm going to just gently put my pin in that crease. Okay? Now, that one I folded right sides together. This piece here was folded wrong sides together. That will just sit right into that crease very nicely for me. I'm going to take this pin out, and I'm going to put it right back in. Now, one of the things that I will do then is I'm going to just gently lay this out. I'm not pulling and stretching. I'm not doing anything to torque it or make it crazy. And then about 4 inches in on this, the bottom side, I'm going to look and just leave this nice and gentle in place. And I'm going to just carefully match that all up. So I'm matching nicely, and I'm going to go in about 4 inches, and I'm going to put another pin. Now, from here to here, you can see we've got a little bit of a wave there. That's okay. I can then just ease this in just a little bit in between these 2 pins. I never want to ease in this outside. That'll make it where you wind up with weird little points and things that are just not askew. So just by putting it there, I'm going to start stitching here. I'm going to come all the way to here without any stretching or buckling or bellying. And then anything that I need to ease in will be in between these 2 pins. If you want to pin more places, you can do that. Just ease this in. So I'm just giving it a little bit of a stretch there to make it lay really flat. I'm going to do exactly the same thing on this side. I'm going to come right from here. I'm going to line those up nicely. I'm going to set a pin at about 4 inches, and then I'm going to ease those 2 in. And that way I'm going to keep this really nice and flat for myself. Okay, so I'm going to sew. I have another pin. Of course, grab you some here today. Just grab me one more, Deanna. Right on the long arm tray there's some. Okay. While she's grabbing me a pin, I'm going to cut my other piece right at the 15 inches, so we have both pieces exactly the same. Again, I'm going to lay it out. I'm going to set my ruler right on top of it. Thank you. Right on top of it.
They can't see you over there if you've been
It's
telling
okay,
them things.
Sorry, Deanna.
It's okay.
I'm just trimming my other piece exactly like I did the first one, so that I've got it ready to put on the opposite side. Okay, so I'm going to put one more pin in here, and I'm going to put it in about 4 inches. Set it in there. And then right from here to here, I'm going to ease. Now, do you see this little bitty tail that's sticking out there? I'm not going to worry about that. I'm not going to trim it up either. I'm just going to use this and this as my little guide. And see, I'm just going to sew right along that edge there. Okay? And because I gave it that little stretch, it's sitting right nice and neat. Okay, so under the machine it goes. Oh, don't lose that underneath there. If you want to shake that iron for me.
Yeah.
Okay. So, the trick of sewing borders on is we use this little acronym called baggy on the bottom. So you could see that I had a little bit more fabric on the bottom layer of it. So I'm going to let my feed dogs pull that through. So the section that I want to have a little bit of stretch to is going to go on the bottom. I love that little acronym though, baggy on the bottom. Okay, I'm nice and squared up on my corner there. Looks like I might have to rethread my needle. I do, of course. Of course, I do. The curliest little end on here. There we go. And this machine does not have a needle threader, so bear with me a second here. Oh my god, it's so curly. Oh mio, oh mio.
Need snips?
Here. Yeah, here's do not watch.
Do as you say, not as you do.
Exactly, do as I say, not as I do. Hopefully it cut it clean enough though. I usually have my cute little box sitting here and I didn't get it there. Last week Patty taught us a song and we couldn't get it out of our head all week. This week somebody started singing 100 bottles of beer on the wall. I'm like, oh my god, please, I cannot have one of those things stuck in my head all week long. No, I can't get this. Scissor. Okay. Okay, so while Deanna's doing that, I'm going to talk real quick about something happening on Saturday. On Saturday this week, which is the 3rd of April. Let's see here. I'll tell you the date. Yes, the 3rd of April from 12 to 4, I am teaching another quilt out of the Quick as a Wink book. It is the one that's called In a Flash. Thank you. Mm-hmm. It is a great pattern. It takes 3 1-yard cuts of fabric, and it's great if you have a focus print. So if you have something that you want to keep nice and big, it's an awesome one. So 3 1-yard cuts of fabric. We're going to go from 12 o'clock to 4 o'clock. It's right here in the store, and it's $15 for the class. We've done this before, and what we do is we call it our little pop-up class, so it's just kind of fun. $15, you get the class, hang out with your friends, and we ask you to bring a couple of food items to donate to the local pantry. The last time we had 4 bags of groceries. It was awesome. So $15 Saturday, come on in and donate something to the food pantry. Okay, now I can trim that thread with these little scissors. And I'm so sorry for being a slug today. We have been so busy today. Deanna and I have just had a plate full of things trying to get everything done. This morning I taught an applique class that was awesome. If you haven't tried applique, come join me one of these days. We really had fun. Okay, so here we go. We're going to grab this piece here and baggy on the bottom. So the piece that is longer goes on the bottom. We want no stretch in these first about 4 inches is how I typically like to work. It really just keeps things much cleaner for me. So remember, I'm going to start with my fabric just off of the foot, and I'm going to give myself a couple stitches to get it going. And now I'm going to go ahead and stitch right at my 1/4 of an inch, all the way up to that pin that I've got. And again, a scant 1/4 of an inch, and even with me using a scant 1/4 of an inch, I still lost a little bit. So I could have taken it and pressed it and stretched it, but I'm okay that I'm a little bit short, just as long as I didn't cut my borders and try to make them fit. Okay, so now I'm at this spot where I've got a little bit of bag. So I don't want to put a lot of tension on the front of my fabric, but I do want some tension on it so that way it feeds through nicely. That seam is going the wrong direction. Okay, so we can see it's a little bit loosey-goosey. I'm going to just pull back on it, and it tightens both of those layers up to each other. It keeps it from that bottom just hanging. See, if I have no tension on it, that bottom hangs away from it. If I just give it a little bit of a tug, it's going to feed through much nicer. I have my needle set with the needle down position. That way, if I need to stop and readjust, I can. That little point there was going the wrong direction. I wanted to pick it up and turn it. I can see that I've got a really nice edge there. This is matching up nicely.
How did you know it was going the wrong direction?
I can kind of feel that this is underneath on this side here, and on this side here it was lifting up, so it was making a little bit of a blump. So I can see this is going that way. Sometimes when it makes the transition over to the stitch plate, it'll get itself turned. So if I just lift up and push it back down flat again, I can get it to lay really nicely. It's just helping the pressing. So I know that I kind of have to watch when it hits that transition from the tray table, and I can see that that did not flip or turn out on me. I can see my little black mark. When I get close to my pin, I slow down. I can stitch up close to it, but I should not stitch over any pins. If you get too close to your presser foot plate or your presser foot on there, it's hard to pull your pin out, and sometimes you'll actually distort what you're sewing. So you just need to be careful of placement on that. And then we're going to do the same thing. A little bit of tension here, because otherwise if I have no tension, it doesn't seem to be as close to it. That little bit of tension, it also straightens it out really nice for you. Okay, I'm coming up to a seam that I can kind of feel right here, and I'm not sure. I want to check it underneath there to make sure it's going the right way, and it is. It's going downward, which is the way it wants to go. And now I'm going to go ahead and finish off that seam. My thumb here is sitting on another seam that I can really feel. I'm going to just check it. It looks good. And see how nice that all went together there? I really have no excess fabric, nor am I short. And I stitched off the edge of that. Okay, so now I've got that attached really nicely there, really good and straight. I'm going to go to the ironing board, and Deanna already turned it on for us. She woke it up, I should say. Okay, and again, I am going to set my seam. Remember what that means? It means that we're just going to give it a nice press. Okay, and it looks a little bit waffly to me, and I'm okay with that because I'm going to press that out right now. I'm going to set my iron down and just set my seam. And again, I'm giving it just a little bit of tension on the end there. And you can see how I got rid of that little bit of a waffle. Okay, after I set my seam, I'm going to just finger press it so that I get it moving in the direction I want it to go. And I'm going to come into the center and just walk this out. This red fabric on mine darkens up a little bit. It's nothing to be concerned with. But I did not stretch it. I did not pull it. I didn't do anything. I don't love that it's standing straight up, but I know, and I showed you this before, that we can just take that and just turn it down. And that way, you can see already, if I just take my fingers to it, and when it's warm, I can just press that down a little bit more. Okay. We're going to attach the end on the other side exactly the same way. Sorry, I started crying all of a sudden. Sometimes when I look at the light on my sewing machine, it makes my eyes water.
It's not because you're so sad that we're getting to the end of the quilt.
I know, it's hard to believe, isn't it? But next week, we're going to talk about batting, so that'll be a good topic. Okay, so same exact steps. I'm going to fold. Find the middle, and look at my middle isn't exactly where those two lined up. So you know what? I'm off a little bit on some of my stitches, and I'm okay with that, okay? Find your middle, finger press it. You've got yourself a nice little crease in there. I'm going to set a pin on there so I can find it again easily. Okay, I've got my piece that I've already cut to the 30 inches. I'm going to set that right on top of there, line it up nicely.
Would you do anything differently if that middle that you just found right there had a seam in it?
Oh no, I
Okay.
love it if it has a seam in it.
Okay.
That's actually really nice and clean then to mark off of. Yes. Okay, I'm going to come over to my outside. I'm going to take this and I'm going to put it right at the tip. And I'm going to put a pin in at about 4 inches. No stretching on this outside piece here. And we're going to go ahead and pin that. And we're going to do the same thing on the opposite end. Come down here, come in about 4 inches, put a pin. And if it's a small project, you may only be able to go in about 2 inches. The more pieces you have, the more careful you need to be on these outside edges because they're going to want to pop open on you. So I've got this ready to be pinned and now are ready to be sewn. I'm going to sew that. And again, baggy on the bottom. So I always want to sew with my more pieced end at the very bottom of this on the underside. Set it down. I'm going to pull my thread over. And if you watch me sew, I use super light hands. I am not pulling through fabric. Even when I have tension on here, it's not that I'm pulling it super tight because I still want my stitches to be a nice stitch length. So up to my pin, stop, take my pin out. Lay this back out again, make sure it's all nice and neat. Look at where my pin is for the center and go ahead and go again. Oh, this one's got a pretty good baggy bottom on it. So I need a little more tension on that bottom there. Can you see when I relax that, how baggy that bottom is? Mm-hmm. And a lot of that is because this is a solid piece. It has no give in it. On this side, I had a lot more give. So I had more seams popping open or more ability for it to stretch. This being on straighted grain, it doesn't want to stretch so much. So when I pull on this, I've got to give it a little bit more tension, and you can see how I can close up that little bit of a gap. And that's probably why our center wasn't perfectly centered, because the other portion of this had more seams. Okay, back over to the iron board. Dun, 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 dun. I'm loving this little black border though.
Yeah, I thought that was a really good choice.
Okay, so not too wavy. We're going to set our seam. Go into the center, push it out. Get it going, and that helps to flatten out sometimes that little ridge that gets in there.
Teresa says, I finished my sampler and I've already gifted it to my niece in Dallas last week. Thanks for all your help.
Very nice. Very nice. Okay, so last step we're going to do here is measure the opposite way. So in her book, she says you're going to cut now 2 strips at 32.5 inches because we're adding this width here. But again, we need to measure ours. So we're going to lay it out. We're going to measure across the center. And I am at 31 7/8 right there. And I am at 31, not quite 7/8. Let's see if we can lay this out a little bit. 31 3/4. So I'm 1/8 of an inch shy there. And what am I at here? 31 7/8. I'm going with 31 7/8. So I'm going to do that measurement, okay? Bummer is I don't want to do a half of that, okay? So I'm actually going to measure out my full piece, do it at 31 7/8. So we're going to continue this on your own. You're going to be attaching your 2 outside borders, the 2 other black ones, and then you're going to measure and do the other 4 borders on there. So that's your homework. You should wind up with a quilt top that has these little black strips and then whatever you've decided for your outside border. This is one busy quilt I made. Okay, but isn't that fun, guys? So for next week, I want to see your quilt tops with your borders on it. And Teresa, you need to send us a picture of yours so we can see it. We would love to be able to post that. Anybody else, if you've gotten further along and you want to post a picture, it'd be really fun to see them. You can hashtag MadBees Quilt and Sew, or you can just send it to us in a Facebook post, but we would love to see what you've been doing. So everybody have a great week. We'll see you next week when we talk about batting. Bye now.